Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the Black Swan Capitalist YouTube channel. I'm joined once again by my dear friend, Dr. Jim Willie, editor of the Golden Jackass Hat Trick Letter. He's a brilliant writer, a fearless analyst, and one of the very few voices in this ecosystem who has consistently connected the dots between monetary policy, global power shifts, and the architecture now of the new financial system. Dr. Jim Willie does have a background in mathematical statistics, and he's been dissecting these global mechanisms for decades, long before they became mainstream talking points. It's always a pleasure to see you, my dear friend. How are you?
I'm pretty stressed out, but I'm doing okay. I mean, isn't everybody stressed out? I don't know anybody who's not stressed out. I know millionaires and they're stressed out. The lockdown and the fake pandemic did a lot of damage to a lot of people and the economy. There's someone, I got to say something. I have no posts and I have no platform anywhere on social networks. And people are imitating me and they're blocking the date behind me there. They're blocking that date. So I'll be moving this around because they can't block what's moving around in a random fashion. I could be kind of a jerk like this, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to move it around and introduce it from time to time because there's a guy on BitChute who's imitating me. There was another guy on YouTube with an incredible, he's got a Southern accent, a Southern drawl. Okay, I have an accentless Midwestern. All right, there's a lot going on, Versan. I yield sometimes. I yield the floor and admit that in many respects, you know more about what's going on with Ripple Tech and with XRP, but I'm moving pretty fast in learning. And in the last, I think, 5 months of the newsletter on golden-jackass.com, I've got an XRP chapter that is over 10 pages long. It is now longer in length than the gold and silver. Let's face it, gold and silver a year or two ago made a lot of news. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, made a lot of news. And now what we're seeing is a culmination. And, someone has said to me, Jim, you're pivoting from precious metals to crypto, to XRP. I said, no, I'm not. I'm extending. I've not dropped off gold and silver. I still follow it closely, and I regard almost all of my forecasts for price in gold and silver to have been realized, successful calls. And now what I'm seeing is some people, Versan, I think you might agree with me. Some people are saying this isn't a once in a century transformation to digital finance. It's more like once in a millennium.
Yeah.
We may not have a transformation to digital for the next couple hundred years, or like what we're seeing now. What could it be? I'm not going to worry about it. Let me just say that we've got a kind of a century event, and it's a transformation where most of the power brokers, like Wall Street banks, London banks, Swiss banks, and to some degree, Japanese banks, they're giants. They have been opponents to the flagship of Bitcoin. And they've joined in a rather nefarious move. I don't like the word nefarious because that's really evil. A complicitous plot to slow down Ripple. And it started about 3 years ago. I now believe, Versa, I'm not kidding. I believe that all the SEC cases were frivolous. They knew they would lose. Some were planning to lose. And the objective was not to win. The objective was to slow down what I call the plebeian, common guy investment in XRP. They slowed it down. I mean, how many different exchanges banned XRP? I mean, I just learned, and I wasn't aware of this. I learned something all the time. There are a few exchanges that ban Canadian clients. I didn't know that. So a friend of mine in Toronto was talking to me. So what we have now is, after 2 or 3 years of lawfare, let's face it, using the SEC to slow down Ripple and to cripple them and to eliminate private, I call them plebeians. We're plebeians. We're little guys, all right? We're not whales. We're not even big fish. We're plebeians. When I was in the YMCA, I was on a swimming team when I was a little kid, like 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. I wasn't a great swimmer. I was just a good swimmer. And you had minnow, flying fish, shark, and whale. So when you hear the whale being mentioned, I think of, okay, well, who are the flying fish? Well, we're minnows, okay? We're little people. And I call them plebeians at the same time. There are not many people who own, like us, who own XRP. I heard that it's 2% of all the XRP is held by people who have 10,000 coins or more. 1% of the XRP is held by people, plebeians, plebes, who have 50,000 coins or more. It's only 1%. So, when people say, oh, they're knocking down the XRP price because they're trying to shake us out, there's not many people to shake out. They're not, I don't think they're shaking out. I think what we have is corresponding decline because a lot of different altcoins are down. There's not a lot to be gained. If they take it down to $2 flat or to $1.95, they're not going to realize another billion coins. It's not going to happen that way. So it's really, and this brings up a really important point of mine regarding XRP. I believe that there is a quid pro quo going on where Ripple executives and maybe, let's face it, they might know 5 or 7 whales, okay? I don't know. They're not going to tell us. They're not going to say, hey, well, we got a buddy who's over in Morgan Stanley and he's a whale and he does favors. No, they're not going to talk like that. They're not going to tell you what they're doing. But my guess is the following. Ripple and the executives and a certain group of whales are working with the coin exchanges. And as we know, they're down 80, 90% in their exchange wallets. I call that the exchange inventory of XRP. Inventory works the same way. Their inventory, their exchange wallets, it's available there for purchases. I've had a couple people tell me, I worked with Coinbase, I couldn't get it. They said they didn't have any XRP. Okay, this is already starting to happen. So here's my point. The whales and Ripple, in addition to some coin exchanges, are facilitating a magnificent multi-billion coin accumulation by BlackRock, JP Morgan, let's just say et al. Okay? And who's et al? Bank of New York Mellon, Bank of America. If Goldman Sachs isn't there, I'll eat my shorts. You know what I mean? They're everywhere. The giant squid is everywhere. So what does Ripple and Garlinghouse and this vice president, what do they want in return for facilitating a multi-billion coin accumulation by the big financial firms, including JP Morgan and BlackRock? And I think they're trying to get like 5 billion each, 3 billion coins each. What does Ripple want? A bank license.
Fair enough.
What else do they want? They want a lot of cooperation, and they probably got it at the Ripple Swell meeting. I think it concluded yesterday, the conference. They had 20 major financial firms represented there. Maybe it's not just they want the Ripple Bank license. It's Ripple Bank Trust. Interesting name. Okay, I tend to think anyone who names themselves trust, they want your trust. Okay, so that's interesting. I think Ripple wants cooperation to become the global bridge asset standard. They want cooperation. They're going to say, hey, look, JP Morgan, we'll enable you to earn like $100 billion. Work with us. Be our partners. You're not going to work under Ripple. You're going to work with Ripple. This is one of the wonderful things that Ripple does. They make partnerships.
Agreed.
And that was evident with the squabble with respect to Swift. Swift came out and said something stupid and dishonest. We're working with consensus, so we're going to, build our own transfer system. We're not going to use XRP, and we're going to build it on the Ethereum rails. Oh, golly. Just try rotating on this, because it turned out that Thunes, which I don't know exactly, I think they had about 11,000 banks involved in their consortium. They're all using XRP with Swift transfers. Okay, so Swift is a liar. What's Swift's problem? They don't believe in a win-win. They believe in a win-lose. So they won, and they said Ripple lost. They're working with consensus. Who cares? Maybe they'll have something in a couple of years, whereas Ripple had something 3 or 4 years ago. Okay. Okay. Swift, here's my prediction. Swift is going to crawl on their knees and kiss the Ripple ring and ask for XRP cooperation. That it could happen in the next 4, 5, 6 months. Okay. There's another big issue that I've got with respect to XRP. It's not so much a forecast as it is an interpretation. The second big thing, you've got the NASDAQ and its 52 trillion that they want to tokenize. And that includes the FANGMATs, the Magnificent Seven. Those are gigantic. Many of them are over $1 trillion in market cap. Okay. You've got the DTCC, and they're talking about tokenizing derivatives. My gosh, that's not billions, that's trillions. Okay. Yeah. You've also got, 30 or 50, I lose track, 50 central banks that are now integrated with XRP. Okay. You've got a number of different, by the way, that Ripple just announced a MasterCard relationship. So wasn't that supposed to be XLM's domain, Versan? Domestic XLM? Sorry.
Whole different discussion. Actually, there's a complementary relationship there, but another time.
Another time. Well, the way I like to summarize it in very simple terms is wherever XRP competes, they win.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here's the point, the second point. I mentioned the first about the accumulation in return for a Ripple Bank and global standard. The second point is if a big player like NASDAQ, like the DTCC, like a group of central banks, like in the BRICS, the central banks work a little bit more unified. Where the volume is bigger, the savings is bigger. Where the savings is bigger, it's billions. Where the savings is bigger and the volume is bigger, it goes hand in hand with the requirement of a much higher XRP price, like 500 minimum, 1,000. And we're a long way from there. I've got a few clients that say, what is going on? It's now can't even hold $2.50. I said, don't let them shake you out. They're not going to shake out very many. This is a tree that does not have much fruit on those low-lying branches. There's not much fruit on there. They're wasting their time. Okay, so where the big savings comes for the big players, they're going to be the ones requiring $1,000 price or 500. I don't like people saying, "Oh, you're nuts. You're nuts talking about 1,000." Okay, call it 200 or 500. Okay, when Swift said they're going to ratchet it in 10%, another 20%, 10%, another 20%, it's over the stage of months. It's not suddenly 100%. It doesn't work that way in the real world. Oh my gosh. I tell you, those two factors, the accumulation and the big player requirement for a higher price, just to make it work. This is exciting. And people need to be careful about what they have. I had a client contact me a month ago, and after he bought, I don't know, I think it was something like $50,000 worth of XRP, he got a phone call. Okay, it's a phone call where the fraud is. He got a phone call, and they had his banking information, and he had most recent activity, and he had the exact number of coins that he bought with XRP, and told him that he needed to move it. He lost it all. It lost
Yeah. Maybe
56.
some advice for the listeners. Nobody's ever going to reach out to you about your
My phone.
digital assets.
My
And if
phone.
they do, those are indeed indicators that you are possibly being scammed.
Okay, let me give advice that goes the next step. And somebody did this 2 or 3 months ago. He said, Jim, he did a consult call with me and said, Jim, something happened to me. Something happened to me. I got a call. It was my Coinbase account. I got a call. And I said to them, well, if there's a problem and I still see my coins, then how bad a problem can it be? But furthermore, why don't you give me your boss's name and your boss's phone number and the office location, state and city, and I'll call him right away. Thank you very much. The guy hung up.
Yeah.
Okay, this is how you obstruct them. Give me a phone number. Give me your boss's name. Give me your name. Give me your address, your city. I'll call you back. If I can't call you back, then you're bogus. And they never call. They never call. They never call. One of the biggest problems, I think, with the coin exchanges right now is you can't call somebody for customer service. Hey, I just got scammed. Can you help me out? No, there's nobody to call.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, there's so much to unpack in what you said, and I'm glad you keep moving that around because
don't
the
let it bother you.
impersonators. No, it's not bothering me. The impersonators and the scammers are certainly getting out of control with the advances of AI. I've seen some crazy things, videos of my own self. Um, it's my voice, but it's not my face, and it is a bit concerning. If they were saying the wrong thing to undermine our credibility and our reputation, and saying one thing and not the other. Anyways, so much to unpack in what you said, and I do want to dive deeper. But for
Where do you want to
a
go?
note, oh, we're gonna take it there. You'll see. For those who are tuning in and new to a lot of this information, it's very important to make it very clear that Swift has really been a tool for weaponization of the dollar against countries around that world that wouldn't bow down to a global financial order. And RippleNet indeed did disrupt that model. And XRP was the real disruption behind it because they were offering an alternative, creating a new kind of financial institution, one that was global, instant, and sovereign. I think that's very important. And that's why these big institutions are fighting them so hard. But indeed, their control is slipping. They are losing control very fast, and it's only accelerating. And I don't think they can hold much longer. And another thing to note is that if you start to look at all of Ripple's developments and the expansion, it's a growing realization, you could say, that Ripple isn't just building payment corridors, they're actually rewiring finance through the infrastructure for an entirely new global financial system. So that's why, to your point, Jim, we're seeing a lot of integration with banks, central banks, cross border trials under the new Bank for International Settlements frameworks. And this tokenization framework that is popping up all across BlackRock and Vanguard, and you're seeing everybody get involved, but it's popping up also across Asia, the Middle East, Latin America. This is happening worldwide. So, from your perspective, Jim, and I know you did tackle this briefly, but what do you think the real motive here is? We are indeed witnessing like a controlled demolition and transition from a dollar based system to a multipolar settlement network.
I think the objective is to replace the traditional, let's just call it paper-based, paper and email and phone-based old technology banking system. There's a transformation to replace it. And the big challenge that I foresee, and we're observing elements of it now, is that the old guard has a lot of power. Let's face it, in the last 10 years, it's been rather obvious, last 5 years, rather obvious that doctors and bankers are controlling the world. Doctors, bankers, and militaries. Well, the militaries aren't controlling as much as they're fighting each other. But, where does the power lie? Doctors, bankers, and warriors, soldiers. Okay, what I believe, you talk about the integration. I focus a bit more on the partnerships. Certainly there's integration, certainly, and expansion and building out the infrastructure. Yeah, but that is being done now in a very astute manner by Ripple with their acquisitions. Okay, I have a list. I'm looking at it right now. Hidden Road, 1.125 billion of multi-asset prime brokerage. So they got brokerage. Rail, 200 million. That's not a lot for stablecoin platform. Okay, that's great. G Treasury, I think that's really big. $1 billion acquisition for G Treasury, corporate treasury bonds. And I'm hearing it's like 15, 20,000 different corporate bonds that will be able to be moving around in the Ripple ecosphere and final bridge asset transfer with XRP. Evernorth is really clever. Another $1 billion. And I believe, and this is a bit my interpretation, but based on what I'm reading, it's a venture cap internal firm. It's a venture cap subsidiary and tech services and partnership funding. Then there's Trident, $500 million, treasury reserve management for corporations. Then you got a bunch of little ones, and I honestly hadn't heard of any except SBI Holdings out of Japan. They're like a liaison for the entire nation of Japan. And I don't know how many people are aware, I know you probably are, but it was November last year that the banking authorities in Japan ordered XRP compliance to every single Japanese financial firm for this year. Last November, they ordered that. I heard a rumor, and I can't substantiate it, but the Bank of Japan ordered no more usage of SWIFT. Yes. I tend not to believe that, but maybe it's true. They want to use XRP because there's savings.
Yes.
SWIFT
I see that.
SWIFT is going to be relegated to a secretary that handles all the data and memos. I had a broker once, and he used to say, "Runner."
Well, can I add something I want to compliment what you're saying, because you have been doing a lot of research into this. I'm excited to hear your insights. But one of the other pieces that a lot of people haven't connected yet, this is something Jake Claver has openly talked about, is the reverse carry trade. And, for just some context, Japan has publicly been working with Ripple for many years. Japanese banks already have publicly committed to using XRP by 2025. Here we are. I think it's happening gradually and effectively. But they have been preparing for this very scenario because systemic stress is hitting global liquidity markets, and that's tying us back into the dollar. But as more money is going to flow back into Japan and the credit markets are going to come under more pressure, this is when you're going to have this necessity, this need for some sort of neutral instant settlement system that's outside of the dollar or even the yen. That becomes unavoidable. And that's exactly how XRP can play a critical role in Japanese banking infrastructure as a bridge asset for on-demand liquidity. So it's very interesting to see how all of this is really accelerating, to your point.
Let me make a third point. Okay, I came with my notes. These are major points in my opinion. I can get to the Japanese yen carry trade in a bit, because that's huge, and I've been talking about that for 5 years. Okay, let me go back a little walk back in the 1980s, when I'm not sure. I don't think you were alive. No. Okay, I finished my doctorate in 1980, and I got a job at Digital Equipment Corporation. Mm-hmm. And 4 years later, I left the quality control area of that business. And we were number 2 at the time. I'm a Decky. I will be a Decky for as long as I live. Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC, DEC. It was IBM number 1, DEC number 2, Hewlett Packard number 3. When I got to the marketing research job, I changed jobs because I had a really, really crappy manager in my quality control work. That was 4 years. It wasn't wasted, but it was interfered with and not properly rewarded. So I took a a raise, I took a promotion, and I went into a marketing research group. The first thing they had me do was work on a marketing research survey, big survey, 50,000 in the United States and Europe and England. And what was the focus? Unix. Now, you probably know what Unix is. You've probably heard of C and C++ and C++. Well,
no.
Okay. There are programming languages in Unix.
Okay.
C++, and now you got a raft of other programming languages like Python is very popular, and there are a few others that I'm not very familiar with because I predate the Unix. I was in graduate school in the 1970s. Unix came about around 1982, 3, 4. It was from AT&T. All right, why do I bring this up? Because Unix enabled interoperability. Does that zip word mean something to you now? With
Yes.
XRP, interoperable, different banking systems, different structures.
Basically one settlement language.
One settlement language and one originating language. Two different incompatible languages. That's why they call XRP the bridge asset. Well, why was Unix big at the time? What was really important back then was that IBM had its hardware, and then IBM had its software built upon its operating system, all proprietary, all private, digital. We had VAX VMS, virtual management system. It was for swapping. Now we know what swapping is again. Swapping has new meaning in the banking industry. Back then, they had swapping for memory efficiency, and you could get along with less RAM because digital and its virtual management system was extraordinarily efficient and a global leader. Okay, so if you had a bunch of software and you had 10 years invested in it at IBM, and then suddenly you're working with a new hardware system like Hewlett Packard or Honeywell or Burroughs or Digital DEC. Can you move that software over? No, you could not. No, you could not. It was not interoperable. Unix was interoperable. They used to say hardware independent. And we thought, holy shit, we're going to lose our software business. And we did. And we did.
So the competition pretty much killed you with the tech.
They killed us with the tech to make the interoperable. Now,
Right.
What we've got now is that XRP is interoperable. You can have one banking system like from JP Morgan, and they communicate with a Rome bank, or communicate with a Brussels bank, or a Frankfurt, Germany bank, and it's interoperable. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Dollars to Deutschmark, no, not Deutschmark, to euros. Dollars to yen in Japan. Okay, we've got a huge advantage with XRP being a leader in the interoperability. And after I heard interoperable about 20 times, I thought, sounds like Unix in the 1980s. I'm telling you, Unix was a revolution in the computer industry, and XRP is going to bring about a revolution in the banking industry from its interoperability.
Yes. And that, to your point also, that's what's so interesting about these discussions. Like, a lot of people think we are indeed heading towards like some sort of digital chaos, but what we're actually watching is a controlled consolidation. And through these features, like interoperability is an example, but ultimately this does leave XRP with only one option. It basically means it's becoming that settlement layer that will underpin not only fiat, but digital currencies, stable coins, etc., tokenized commodities, bonds, and even carbon credits now. And when people start to ask, the question about market cap, and I dismiss market cap really. I don't think it's not something that, it's a really stupid one. Yes. Or even price range, you have to understand, like, what are we truly looking at to handle the magnitude of all of this, right? And that's when we start having those discussions about a very high XRP price. Um,
let me quote. Pardon me. Let me quote Jake Claver. He said, "I'm tired of all these market cap limitation arguments. What exactly is the market cap for email?"
yeah, it's silly.
What
And
a great question.
well, I mean,
What if you had to
mhm,
buy some tokens in order to use your email?
yeah,
What's the email token going to be worth? What was it worth in 1980? What would it be worth 10 years later? Another 10 years later, another 10 years later. Would it not be worth hundreds of trillions of dollars?
yeah.
Yes.
But
And
in
that's
XRP, it's a bit different. And I totally agree with that and the sentiment behind it. But when a lot of listeners they start to look at XRP, first of all, they treat it as a token. They don't realize it's been mixed in with a lot of the nonsense out there. But in XRP, liquidity is not necessarily about how many tokens actually exist in the circulating supply. It's about how much value can actually move through the system overall in each XRP itself. And that kind of ties us into the discussion we'll get into here in a moment. But the higher the price is of XRP, the more greater its liquidity efficiency is. And that means
exactly.
fewer and fewer tokens are going to be required to settle larger and larger transactions. And I did write an interesting article about this on X. It's getting covered, a lot of coverage, and I really appreciate that from the rest of the community. But I gave an example in there that if you're trying to settle, for instance, worth $1 billion of a cross border settlement, and if you had at $1 per XRP, that transaction would require 1 billion XRP. But if you had a $10,000 XRP, just to give an example, per XRP, that means it would require just 100,000 XRP. So you're significantly having fewer and fewer tokens moving across that network because there's less slippage, there's lower volatility, there's
Friction.
faster finality. Exactly.
Less friction.
Very exciting.
And
It is exciting. I'm very optimistic about this.
that's why the big players with their big usage and their big volume and their big savings are going to want a big price.
Exactly.
It's not very difficult to follow that logic. I've actually had some good arguments with people who are what I consider to be uninformed. I don't want to call them ignorant.
Not your brother again, right?
No, I haven't talked to my brother in 5 years.
Okay.
5 years. I know that's hard to believe, but
No,
I have no interest in further communication with my brother.
I'm sorry, but yeah, that kind of goes back to the pandemic. It really destroyed
Well,
lives
yeah.
and affected families.
Well, if you're going to advocate Marxism in the United States and be an opponent to liberty and the republic, there's the door.
Yeah, I know people like that.
I have no interest in a conversation with them.
Yeah. Sorry. Mm-hmm.
I don't know where you want to go next.
No, actually, I mean, if you
I'm
don't
open.
mind, I mean, we can always remember we can bounce back and forth, and it's
Sure.
for us to bounce back and forth because there are so many other pieces in this that are all tied together. I do want to talk about what has transpired since we last spoke, and I'm sorry to the audience that it took a while to do part two, but since we spoke, gold has made a significant move, and not just in price, but in purpose, and that's what's so important for people to not miss out on. It's not just a passive store of value anymore. It's gradually being reintegrated back into the monetary architecture as collateral. And when we start to dig even deeper into this, and I want to get your take on this, Jim, I'll ask you here in a second, behind this transformation, how gold is actually being remonetized at the institutional level, and of course, how XRP is being positioned as the settlement mechanism above that overlays it all. So I know you have been analyzing this for a while in depth since we last spoke. And, I want to ask, what are you seeing really in terms of gold's role? How it has changed in the last 6 months? And of course, how is it tying into what banks are doing globally and even XRP?
I think the big shift in the mindset regarding gold is that it's no longer thought of as a barbaric metal. It's no longer thought of as in terms of what income it can produce. And I got to say, Warren Buffett, you're a big fat liar. He got called away. He got called away after selling
Mark
covered
Cuban
calls.
too. Mark Cuban. I just want to put that out there.
Oh, okay, good. They got called away after writing covered calls, and they lost their silver. Well, Warren Buffett, I don't know the full story about Mark Cuban. He's a bit of a detestable figure.
He's a liar.
What I what I believe has happened is that there is a it's hard to call it a transformation. It's a complete shift of mindset and perception. We now are recognized as having entered a tremendous unresolvable problem of having a debt foundation. We have a debt foundation and we got a gigantic debt. And we've been told that debt is a good, solid foundation, but now the big, fat $38 trillion debt is causing the entire global financial system to stutter, to fail. For instance, big banks in the United States are not lending institutions anymore. They've lost, I think, 3/4 of that function. Unless and until, for instance, the Wall Street banks and the big bank giants in the United States realize an enormous gain with XRP, they might no longer be insolvent, then they can go back to becoming a lending institution again, instead of a predatory institution that captures commercial property because they won't roll over the mortgages. Hand over your keys. I know one case, Northern Midwest, my client's friend lost $20 million because they couldn't find a rollover of their mortgage on a big property complex. Okay, so the realization, Versan, is that gold is a really effective foundation. Foundation. We need to rebuild the foundation. We got a lot of gold out there, and some nitwits, knuckleheads think, well, gold should go way down to $100 per ounce because there's so much of them.
Yeah,
so much
silly.
gold. And I tell them, this is my response, and I'm sassy. I'm always sassy. There are a lot of television sets in US and Canada. There are a lot of shoes. Why doesn't the price of TV sets go down to $20? There's a lot of supply. The reason is they're not for sale. There's a lot of gold. It's not for sale. It's set up and it is now promised to be the foundation. And I'm just waiting for more and more digital assets to become gold related, linked to gold in some fashion. But I don't want to go down that road. I want to focus on how there's a widespread global recognition that the king dollar has destroyed the global foundation for finance.
Very powerful statement. Very true.
And XRP is very likely the top candidate to replace the treasury bill for global trade payments.
I agree.
Now, let's leave out the Forex reserves, because that's the other side of, it's trade payment standard and global reserves standard. But that's pretty much up in the air and a lot of dispute. And, it's integrated with stable coins. And I think, I just think it's just a time bomb before Tether has a volcano that resembles diarrhea.
I love your analogies.
I like my metaphors. I work on my metaphors in my quiet time. Let me also say, here's another one. SWIFT is the standard bearer of banking obsolescence.
Interesting. Haven't heard that one before.
7% errors. I just had an error last week, a SWIFT error. Cost me 3 days. SWIFT error, 7% SWIFT errors. Okay, those SWIFT morons, you got to get with the 20th century here. I'm sorry, 21st century, and get in gear. And I'm afraid I would really like to hear that SWIFT is relegated to memos. Okay, hey, runner. I love that. A commodity broker would say runner, and every time he did, I would laugh because I met him for lunch in Chicago. It was a very interesting meeting. Commodity traders, mostly bonds, currencies, and not a lot of other things. S&P futures, stock futures, but not cotton, not not copper contracts. No, there was, oh gosh, what is it? The euro dollar contracts. We had lunch and I learned a bunch of different things. Runner. I want Swift to become the runner, and the runner for managing the Ripple XRP transfers. Okay, we're ready. We're ready, Ripple. We're ready. We got A and B all set here. No nostro vostro. I did my job with the memo because that's all I do now at Swift. Oh my gosh, Swift! If they're not careful, if they pick the wrong fights, they're going to be shown the door.
I think it's already happening little by little, but a few things to tackle on what you said over there, and going back to gold too, because one thing we can look at, there are so many moving pieces to all of this, but one thing we can certainly look at is the US debt. They say it's 37 trillion. I put a tweet out today. I don't agree it is 37. In fact, I think it's way over 150 trillion because you have to factor
at
in
100. At 100.
Yeah, maybe even two, right? But you have to factor in Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government expenses, the black budget, and that is something bigger. And I think over time, when with all this other frameworks being put in motion from the central banks and so forth, and all the gold buying, there's certainly another quiet story happening behind the scenes. And my point, though, is that it's going to get to a point where eventually blockchain, when we're talking about Ripple Net, it's going to expose and provide that transparency that's going to show the full picture. And I think that's a kind of moment where you could start to see gold really be at these very high valuations, like being reset, revalued, if you will, like $10,000, $20,000 an ounce. It's not fantasy, it's just math. We've spoken to people in the past who have been in the financial sector, in the gold space, specifically in Switzerland. They came up with the numbers in 2022 that gold should have been 87,000 an ounce when you factor in everything. And
factor
where
in
am I bringing
the money supply? Factor in the
yeah,
money supply.
that's one piece of it. Certainly, I agree with you. But in essence, what I think is playing out is that gold again being integrated back into the system. For those, listen, the analysis is not theoretical of some of the things we've talked about here. And you and I talked about this before, maybe 2 years ago. But the mechanisms are clearly being laid out through institutional adoption, institutional behavior, central bank positions, liquidity being focused around regulatory frameworks. What regulatory frameworks? We're talking about the IMF, the BIS. Now, my point, though, is that gold is going to provide stability and intrinsic value for where this is all going. And I think XRP is going to be that layer, enable settlement, transfer that can move value like gold across markets, creating a bridge for traditional and digital finance. But the trend is clear, in my opinion. I think gold is going to anchor value, and I think XRP will move it efficiently. I mean, this is what the infrastructure is telling me years before it may happen.
I think we're going to see a reval, Versan. We're going to see a reval. It's not going to be just one item. It's not going to be just one asset. How would it be if you distract from the XRP reset reval? If you have a $20,000 gold reval, you have a $150 silver reval, or $200 reval for silver, and at the same time you reval your XRP to be 1,000 or 2,000. Now that's a big jump for XRP. That'd be like 1,000 would be 400 from what it is now.
You're basically saying, to complement it, basically if gold's price is quietly being revalued at some point to support this new system, basically to backstop the tokenized reserves and these debt instruments, it's very possible we're going to watch the early stages, but eventually get to a place where global repricing takes place. And that will actually require XRP to match that value that's flowing across.
And the gold reval and silver reval will be a distraction. People won't focus entirely on the fact that they just jumped XRP more than 100-fold. And that will be to enable its proper designed function. Yes. We cannot have a global adoption of XRP with a $50 price. It will not work. So what we might get is a segmentation coming, where there'll be some BRICS nations, there'll be Japan, Korea. I think the United States is going to be a laggard. We're going to be a laggard. We're not leading. We're not leading jack shit. We're leading in congressional disunity. We're leading in civil war. We're leading in election fraud. We're leading in border disputes where we can't even control our own borders. We're leading in cartel warfare. We're leading in bickering, partisan bickering that shuts down a stupid shit government. We're not leading in jack shit. That's why I think we're going to be following the rest of the world. And I just read an article today. It said Japan is now considering that they should follow the BRICS movements and initiatives rather than the Western, because the Westerns are so bent on war and bickering.
Well, I think they're fighting for survival, and they're just disguising it as national security. And here's another thing to your point. I actually tweeted this like a year ago, that it's, if you look very closely at some of the things we talked about, Jim, it would seem that something is being built called ARC, where basically America, Russia, and China are going to have a coalition against the European countries. And where I'm going with this is interesting. I'm going to ask you about it, and I want your honest, unfiltered take without getting me kicked off YouTube, if that's possible. But it's very possible that if you look closely at everything, it seems that we're moving in the trajectory of the BRICS nations, but we're not calling it that. And we just keep showing American strength when really, I mean, example, 16 states in the US are now putting laws in place to make gold and silver legal tender. We are looking at silver, and we talked about this last time, where it might even become a strategic asset for our government. So if you look closely, right, yeah, that was very interesting. Exactly, right? So when you start to think about these things, and this is where I want to get your thoughts on, because this really ties this conversation together at a much deeper level. For many years, we've talked about this, but we're now talking about the restructuring of global finance. We're talking about gold reemerging as collateral. We're talking about XRP forming that digital settlement layer. But behind all of this, and this is where the other discussion comes in, there's that old story of the old guard, the entrenched financial power structures, the deep state, the banking cabal, whatever you want to call them, this architecture. These are the same entities that controlled the legacy systems, intelligence, defense, big finance. Do you think that they're going down, or are they fighting right now? And, what are your true thoughts about this ongoing battle? Because I think while we're witnessing some form of decentralization expand, we're seeing also the opposite take place, the rollout of digital IDs, the tokenization of everything, own nothing and be happy, the increasing control mechanisms that are wrapped in language and innovation. You know what I mean? So it's something I worry about quite often, and I've made it very clear I will not participate in the system if they try to force some chip into my skin or something along those lines.
I call it the banker cartel.
Sure.
And they've got a cartel business model, and it's loaded with profit, and it enables fraud. It permits fraud with impunity, insider trading. I mean, JP Morgan, duplicate serial numbers for treasuries, a certain building in South Manhattan that went down. Yeah, loaded with that kind of data. I believe 9/11, I'm sorry, that infamous day in September, 24 years ago.
Thank you.
That was a bank event. That was a banker event. I believe the banking cartel is now on notice. You adapt to the digital framework, or you're obsolete and you will not be able to compete. You will not be able even to be included and integrated. I gave an example to a client during a consult call. Imagine there are 4 big banks, maybe think of 4 Wall Street banks. And one of them says, we don't want to join the digital transformation. We don't want that architecture. We don't want that. We're going to stick with what we have. We're comfortable. We're comfortable. We know what we have. We're comfortable. and we got a nice business profit model. We're comfortable. 6 months later, they're out of business. Okay, so adapt, get integrated, or become obsolete. You're not going to be shown the door. You're going to be outside looking in. All right, so now the whole battle changes form. Versan, this is really delicate stuff.
Oh, I know.
And here's how I put it in real terms now. BlackRock and JP Morgan said, we want to be involved in the control of this. Ripple, how do we do it? Work with us. Mm-hmm. We're not going to hand you the keys of the kingdom and have Ripple with a bank license, and we all work with you. And before you know it, Stellar has a bank. Before you know it, Hedera has a bank. Before you know it, other, Cardano has a bank. And then all of Wall Street's working for you guys. It's not going to work that way. So BlackRock and JP Morgan asked Ripple, how do we get there? Can we become partners without killing each other, without crushing each other in competition? And that's why I think they're holding it down under 250 with XRP. And that's why I think BlackRock is looking for 3 to 5 billion coins. JP Morgan is looking for 3 to 5 billion coins. And a couple of other Wall Street banks are looking for the same, so that they can earn $100 billion and be major players for the next chapter.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take, and I do appreciate it, because I've thought something very similar too. My brother and I have had this concern. We feel like we're witnessing this very strange convergence. You have decentralization on one hand, and you have centralization happening simultaneously. Because blockchain was really built to empower sovereign individuality, transparency, et cetera, et cetera. But on the other hand, we do see giants like BlackRock, Vanguard, JP Morgan tokenizing assets and inserting themselves as gatekeepers of this new digital economy. And that's almost, in my eyes,
they can't execute the trade. They can't execute the transfer
without XRP.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
That's the partnership.
But this is where it gets weird, though. It's almost like the deep state. Two things to this. Okay, deep state realized, you know what, we can't stop this technology, so they decided to co-opt it to a degree. We can argue on that.
They're trying.
But then there's the other side. This is where stable coins come in, because stable coins change the dynamic of the conversation entirely, because they're being used now to provide a new source of liquidity that can extend these kick the can down the road cycles even further. That means institutions can manage systemic risk and maintain broader market stability, sure. But when you look at, for instance, stable coins overall, and yeah, sure, Tether, we can definitely tie this to Tether, but the proposed digital dollar, it gives the perfect example of what we're talking about here, because it allows the US Treasury and the Federal Reserve to expand the reach of the US dollar in a digital format. And this is essentially basically the deep state getting its hands into the pie. And I said this word for word long before David Sachs stood right by Donald Trump and discussed this live. It was really, it gave me goosebumps. So I think that's their mechanism to get their hands into this ecosystem. But they still need XRP.
I think the stable coin is the bridge. The key word is bridge. BlackRock and JP Morgan. Those two, if you can solve it for them, you can solve it for the rest of Wall Street. You can solve it for the big regionals.
I'm going to show you something.
BlackRock and JP Morgan need a bridge to the digital world. Go ahead.
This is it. I did a whole report on this in detail. This is one of the bridges they're using with the whole stable coins. Stronghold. This is what they're using to get a lot of the value on chain. And like you said last time, so what if they use Bitcoin? So what if they use Ethereum? Let them bring it on board. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're using this technology to do it. It's one of them. Anyways, I've researched this thoroughly and I've shared it with the audience before. And by the way, anyone investing in crypto, this is certainly a massive opportunity.
Oh, I think that's easily 100x coming.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I heard about Stronghold 2 years ago, and I've got
hopefully for me. No,
I I have a client in Texas who's loaded up with Stronghold. Okay, the key is bridge from one world to the other. And you know, Cardano's, oh gosh, I can't think of his name. The Cardano's president,
Charles Hoskinson, if I'm not mistaken.
Hoskinson, something like that. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
He basically raised a white flag. What he said was that, okay, reading between the lines, the interpretation of what he said was that Ripple has won. Ripple's strategy has been successful. Ripple and XRP are bridging the old traditional banking world with the new digital world. And Cardano's mistake was to be too pure, was to be too exclusive with digital and no relationships to tarnish and dirty their hands. Cardano did not want to talk to Wall Street and BlackRock.
Yeah.
Ripple did, to make them partners. Ripple is going to be the bridge asset to link the giant financial firms and financial markets. And not just that, but the big financial departments for the giant corporations. Like, you know,
I mean,
Apple's financial department, IBM's financial department, Apple's financial department, Amazon's financial department. They're huge.
Well, yeah, XRP is becoming a global reserve asset then. We can say this. There's no argument over it anymore. It's
hearing the word treasury reserve. Treasury. XRP
I think in the early stages, absolutely. But later on down the road, no doubt, the XRP by intrinsic design is supposed to absorb value and consolidate value. That's how it becomes. Everybody holding an XRP token essentially is holding a stake in a system that is gradually consolidating everything around it.
In a protocol. Now, how long will it be before Google announces this? I'm just fast forward 18 months ahead.
Yeah,
okay?
Trend forecasting, yes.
Google announces and Amazon announces they've got a $20 billion profit from their XRP held in their treasury.
Yeah. Yeah, things just really start to get out of control.
And the Amazon stock and the Google stock goes up tenfold. Okay.
And this is basically the real play, how XRP could be used as leverage later on down the road. Another discussion for another time.
And other, you know, Silicon Valley firms, they know about the development with XRP better than most of your average Joes running around in St. Louis, Detroit, Denver, and Atlanta, and Miami. Okay, I focus on bridge. Okay, Unix was interoperable across computer architectures. XRP is interoperable across different financial systems.
Yes.
Structures and their own protocols and their own, you know, oh gosh, what's the right word? Their own standards. Okay, when I was at Digital, we had huge arguments over whether you could use and you know, how long will it take to take a bunch of software, a whole library of software for IBM and make it usable in digital. Unix solved that. XRP is going to solve the same thing. Interoperable.
Right. Yeah. And that's why it's so important to recognize that, you know, it's a complementary ecosystem to a degree, but there are assets that are going to form some sort of natural hierarchy of finance. You will have like a kind of a central bank. I think Ripple is on its way to becoming that. A bank, basically a trusted custodian. Yes. And an alternative to central banking. You have retail markets, which are very important. Of course, I think XLM is fulfilling that role to a degree, and that's debatable as well. And then you have the payment rails. So each of them is interoperable. They're all built to flow and bridge to each other, and they're all compliant with the regulatory framework. So this is kind of what you're referring to, you know, a new messaging standard that's being adopted globally by banks and central banks and individuals alike and small businesses and so forth.
Let me introduce yet another important point from my notes. It's hydraulics. You've got 100, 200, 500 major corporations in the United States, Canada, and Western Europe. They all have to play ball, collaborate, and become partners with the bridge asset for doing their transfers. How many are there? XRP, XLM, Cardano, HBAR.
Yeah,
What's the
strategic
strategic?
assets.
How many different strategic corporations are there that have the coins, the altcoins that work?
Yeah.
Cardano. There was one more that I missed. I can't think of what it
HBAR.
is. No, I said yeah, okay, HBAR, but
You can count them in. I know they're in there for a fact.
XDC.
XDC. That's
I thought
correct.
XDC was going to be a major player for stock market transactions until NASDAQ got introduced to XRP. Everywhere XRP competes, they seem to win. Okay, this is very exciting. Okay, the hydraulics. Here's the point. You got 1,000 different companies, and they're all funneling into 7.
Yeah.
There aren't
Yeah.
700 majors in the crypto digital world building out the infrastructure.
Yeah.
They're not.
It's consolidating all value. Mm-hmm.
It's consolidating value, but there are only a few of them.
Right.
Therefore, they're all very likely to go up 1,000-fold.
I agree entirely.
There's
Jim, I mean, listen, fantastic discussion. I did tell you I do have another
Yes.
call approaching here shortly. However, there is something. If you're comfortable talking about this, I know you are. But before we wrap up, I do want to bring this topic up, and I'm going to start talking about this little by little because I think it's important. So, what I want to get your take on, and I think it is even connected to some of the other things we talked here today about global coordination, control, and even potential psychological operations. It gets a little weird here, but if you see a lot of the narratives being said about major disclosures coming in 2026, now this is around the UAPs. Are you familiar with the UAPs, or what most people call the whole
UFOs. Yeah.
UFO thing? I mean, the mainstream coverage around this has grown exponentially. I don't think that's an accident with the direction everything is going, whether it be political or financial, because it's really the financial system that underpins society and our behavior behind it. So the speculation now is not everything that we've been told. I don't think it's organic. I think it's mostly BS, what's coming out as far as how the narrative is being set. Now, I do remember, and I have listened to people in the past where the founders of NASA in the early days, and we can all translate NASA and see what that means. I don't want to say it here, but one of the close colleagues was warned that eventually there would be an engineered false flag event, which would be a stage scenario involving an extraterrestrial threat used as a final underlying force, you could say, to bring all nations under a one world government. And now I'm not saying that's guaranteed that it could happen, but I think given the circumstances and how the narrative is being set and what we've seen with the global coordination during the pandemic, other crises, how do you think this narrative could be used to consolidate power? I'm just curious what you think about all of this.
Okay, this is a good opportunity for me to share a philosophical strategy that I've had with my newsletter for 22 years now. It's 21 and a half years. If they talk about it and it gets out there in the discussion, it ain't going to happen.
Interesting.
Okay, now let me give you some exact examples, precise examples. It was somewhere around early 2023, and we heard that there might be a nuclear detonation in Poland, and they might blame it on the Russians. False flag. And I said, therefore, it won't happen. Then we heard that there might be a Marburg pandemic explosion. Marburg, which is a combination of smallpox and Ebola, laboratory produced. It might happen in the United States. And I just started monitoring, and after a few months, I've heard it about 20 times. Therefore, it's not going to happen. Put it out there 20 times, it's not going to happen.
Why are they doing it?
They're doing it so that it won't happen.
I mean, it's possible they're doing it to keep us distracted from XRP too.
I think the white hats have a supercomputer simulation at work, and they realize the same thing I do. If you talk about it 20 times, it will not happen. So let's get the Marburg out there 20 times. Let's get the alien invasion out there 20 times. Maybe they'll do the attack and they'll do it on the sun, but they'll do it at night.
Well, I totally understand where you're coming from.
Okay.
No, I get it, Jim. But
okay.
I one thing I know for certain is that the tech that you see and hear a lot about is real. When I was an undergraduate, I was at Rice University and I was studying nanotechnology. And one thing I took a very close interest in was quantum trapping, anti-gravitational force fields, and how essentially you can indeed extract energy from the vacuum of space-time. And that's essentially the empty space between us. It starts to get really weird.
It's over my head.
Yeah. So like, obviously the tech exists. So where did that come from?
The tech
biblical?
Is there.
Is it something else? I mean,
I think the alien colonies are deep in the ocean. I've seen many videos regarding U.S. Air Force tracking, and then all of a sudden, hey, they just went into the Pacific, 220 miles east of Los Angeles. We can't track them. And the Tic Tacs, the Tic Tacs they talk about, the little items they call them a Tic Tac. It's just a nickname, but it's a monitor, and it moves tremendously fast. Okay, I have one instance that's close to home, and I don't want to mention locations and I don't want to mention names, but I was told a story where a friend of mine actually saw an event, and what he does is he likes to look east for the sunrise, and he has a home on a hill, and he looks over the valley here, and it's a 30 to 40 mile valley. And he saw a purple dot far in the distance over the mountains on the other end of the horizon. And Versan, he counted 6 seconds that it went overhead to the other horizon.
Yeah.
30 to 40 miles in 6 seconds.
Yeah, it's very fast.
Now, okay, this brings about some easy napkin math. 6 seconds is 1/600th of an hour. So you multiply 30 or 40 miles by 600, and you get 18 to 24,000 miles an hour. That purple dot moved. And my question to him was, what was its altitude? I mean, I'm just full. I don't say, whoa, that's really cool. I come out with questions. I asked, did it make any noise? He said, no, silent. How high was it? He said, it was up there. I couldn't see any details on its structure. It was probably 10,000 feet. I said, then it had to be really big. If you saw a dot, that had to be like maybe 100 meters big in diameter. He said, very possibly. 20,000 miles an hour. Okay. We're not alone. I was in X-Files. I love that stuff. I had a crush on Gillian Anderson. I thought she was just gorgeous. Oh yeah. Anyway, we're not alone. They're hiding in the ocean,
underground,
and they're hiding underground, and they're hiding in full view among us.
Interesting.
With disguises or adaptations. I don't want to get into all that.
Yeah,
but
no, neither do I. I just wanted to.
Your question was on the event to bring about a global power shift. I think it's more likely to happen over a failed foundation to the global financial system. I think it's also more likely to happen regarding a geological, geophysical event like, what's the word? Magnetic pole shift. That's already a concern. I put in the October report the mid-Atlantic current disruption, and that's where warm water and cold water circulate along the Atlantic and go all the way below the equator, and salinity is involved for density of the water. The denser water moves more slowly. The pure water that's not so much salinity, it doesn't move as fast. That whole current is slowing down, and it's really alarmed a lot of scientific people, scientific research types in the U.S. military, and that's one reason they're focusing on Greenland. That's just one of several reasons. So,
what are they terraforming? Changing the ionosphere, changing the temperature of the planet.
I don't think it's aliens. I don't think it's alien technology that's affecting the planet Earth. I think it's the human influence. It's pollution. It's garbage. It's not carbon dioxide. How stupid is that?
That is
stupid. And they're calling nitrogen and carbon dioxide pollutants, taking over farms. Okay, these are essentials for life, and that's why they're attacking them. They're essentials for life.
Oh wow! Okay.
When you see these scientific, what do you call it, science fiction movies like Blade Runner 2050. Oh, I've never seen a tree. That must be really beautiful. Okay, that's the fear. We're going to lose our trees. We're going to lose because of the carbon dioxide that's being attacked by these assholes like Bill Gates. I've got a joke, and it's not intended to be a joke. How many times do we have to execute Bill Gates? How many times?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's been 3 already. We're up to number 4. We're coming up to it.
Supposedly. So,
yeah.
All right. So, okay. This was terrific. Thank you for answering that.
I think it's the financial failure. That's the event.
I appreciate that. Okay. I can see that. Certainly there's a reason to it. So I guess then the real question for the audience, it's not whether we're being visited, but whether the idea of being visited becomes really the final pretext to fully integrate us into a digital order, possibly. I'm not going to throw it out there. Either way, it's very clear. And from my insiders and friends I've spoken to, that 2026, you're going to see a lot of information come out. So, both in terms of what's been disclosed, what's going to be disclosed, and what's eventually going to be deployed. Jim, as always,
Can I close with a brief comment on silver?
Please. My apologies. I should ask.
The word is unobtainium. The shortages are dire. They're drastic. They're severe. And we have already begun. The United States and Trump has already declared silver and a couple of other metals as a strategic national security asset. Mexico is doing the same. They're doing it in a lot different manner. Russia is not, I don't think they're sharing silver for export. I think China has already locked down. Okay, so we got 4 major nations. Mexico is a major nation. They've got close to half the silver production on the planet. Mexico is a silver mine with a bunch of land on top. Okay, that's Mexico. Okay. National security metal competition is coming for silver, and that'll take it to 200 or 300, 400.
I can easily see that. I forgot to mention this, and I should have asked about it, because when I get a lot of this in the comments. Gold and silver are my 2 top buys. I've been buying platinum recently, but silver definitely complements gold. It has a monetary instrument and intrinsic value. Yes, we're going to see some squeezes. Paper market is coming to an end little by little, and blockchain will solidify that as well. But yeah, next time we'll talk about silver a little more deeper. And if anyone's looking to learn a little bit more information on silver, you can certainly follow Jim and even my dear friend Andy Scheckman. I know you and Jim, you and Andy spoke a while back.
Yeah, we know each other.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's been
Andy's a great guy. Andy's a brilliant guy. I learned from him.
I love Andy. Yeah, he's a good friend.
Let me just say about gold and silver, don't be alarmed at the consolidation here. It got ahead. It went parabolic and went above its trend line. It has to calm down. It'll meet up with the moving averages and move upward again very soon. Don't know how long.
They are. I mean, see, these conversations can go on forever, hours.
Yeah.
They are re-leveraging as well. So that's another side to it. So many interconnected reasons. But to your point, I certainly see that. But yeah, we'll have to.
Golden-jackass.com.
Okay.
Support my work. I'm telling you, I'm too vocal. I'm too outspoken. I'm about the only guy who ever talks about money laundering as a financial channel for, like the NASDAQ stocks or for the Swiss banks. Golden-jackass.com. Help me out. Sign up for the newsletter. Make a donation. Get a consult call. I had a consult call scheduled earlier today. We're going to have to make it a couple of days later. The guy had a problem. I've done 820 of them in 5 years, 6 years, almost 6 years now. Okay, it's a lot. They're a lot of fun, and they're boots on the ground. So we could go. I got to shut up. It's golden-jackass.com. Thanks for having me on, and I hope to see you again soon.
No, I was gonna say, you know what, man? We're already having this conversation, might as well. But this is something, again, the comments all the time, and including myself, what I appreciate so much about you is just how comfortable I am when I talk to you, but your honesty as well. You don't sugarcoat anything, and that's exactly what we need in these kind of times. People are hungry for the truth, including myself. We're searching for the truth. We're searching for understanding, and you've helped me along this journey. And just ladies and gentlemen, really, if there's one key takeaway from this, you need to follow Jim's work. And everything we've discussed here, everything is converging: the monetary systems, the technology, even the disclosure. It's all part of this larger transition that Jim's been helping people on, including myself. So whether you view this through one lens of caution or optimism, that's a whole different thing. It doesn't really matter. Awareness is really power. So Jim, thank you again for your time, your wisdom, and even your friendship.
Well, it's great. I'm really glad I met you, and I'm glad I hooked up with you a couple months ago. We had a year that went by. We're going to get a reval for gold, silver, and XRP. I think it's going to be part of the resolution for the U.S. government debt. It's going to be complicated. It's going to be controversial. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you in the next episode of the Black Swan Capitalist. Thank you very much.